I spent 50 years building this family.
This video is born from a deeply personal email sent by one of our longtime subscribers, Arthur, who was born in the landmark year of 1946. He reached out to us recently, not to complain about his fading health, but to share a chilling psychological realization about turning 80 in the year 2026. Arthur wrote that he has suddenly become a ghost in his own meticulously built life. Today, we are sharing his raw confession because it highlights a silent, agonizing epidemic sweeping across millions of households right now. Let us dive into why the very generation that shaped modern history is currently fighting its most heartbreaking battle, completely ignored by the people they love most. Chapter 1: The Invisible Giants. The year 1946 was the starting line for a generation that refused to accept the world as it was. Arthur's generation marched for civil rights, protested wars, built the unprecedented economic boom of the late 20th century, and literally put humanity on the moon. They were loud, fiercely ambitious, and uncompromisingly visible. But now, as the calendar marks 2026, and the first wave of these titans officially reaches their 80th year, society has collectively decided to pull the curtain on them. Arthur describes a subtle, creeping erasure that happens when you cross this age threshold. You walk into a bank, and the teller addresses your middle-aged daughter instead of you. Doctors speak over your head, simplifying your medical condition, as if 80 years of life experience somehow reduced your intellect to that of a toddler. It is a profound psychological insult to realize that your wisdom is no longer considered an asset, but an adorable relic of the past. The giants who built the stage are now being aggressively pushed into the audience, forced to watch their own lives being managed by others. Chapter 2: The Thanksgiving Incident. The true breaking point for Arthur didn't happen in a public space, but at his own dining table during a recent family gathering. He was sitting at the head of the table, carving the roast, surrounded by his 3 children and 5 grandchildren. As the wine flowed, the conversation shifted toward the current housing crisis and the crushing interest rates the younger generation was facing. Suddenly, Arthur's eldest son, Mark, made a casual observation to his siblings. "It's ridiculous that Dad is still living in this massive, 4-bedroom house alone. If we put him in a nice assisted living facility, we could rent this place out and split the equity to cover the kids' college funds." Arthur stopped slicing the meat. His children were discussing his displacement, dismantling his sanctuary, and dividing his assets right in front of him, as if he were deaf, senile, or already dead. The sheer audacity of their entitlement hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They didn't ask for his opinion. They were strategizing his endgame for their own financial relief. Chapter 3: The Heavy Discomfort of Empathy. What makes this situation so intensely painful is the deeply uncomfortable mixture of anger and involuntary empathy. Arthur is not blind to the economic realities of 2026. He knows his children are grinding through a ruthless economy, where hard work no longer guarantees security. He looks at his son's tired eyes and feels a sharp pang of paternal guilt. Have I lived too long? Is my extended lifespan actively preventing my children from thriving? These are the dark, toxic questions that plague seniors in the dead of night. You spend decades wanting nothing but the best for your kids, And suddenly, the best thing you could possibly do for them is to disappear and leave your wallet behind. It is a sickening paradox. You resent them for their greedy, transactional approach to your life. But simultaneously, you mourn the broken system that turned your beloved children into desperate scavengers waiting for your demise. You feel trapped between the instinct to protect your legacy and the agonizing urge to sacrifice yourself one last time. Chapter 4: The Rebellion of the 80-year-old. But remembering who he was, a man of the 1946 generation, Arthur chose courage over silent suffering. He slowly put down the carving knife, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and looked his son dead in the eye. This house is not a bank account waiting to be liquidated, Mark. It is the history of my life, the sweat of my youth, and the place where your mother took her last breath. The dining room went completely silent. The invisible man had suddenly roared back to life. Arthur informed them that he was not moving into a facility, nor was he going to apologize for surviving. He hired a wealth manager the very next week, ring-fenced his assets, and booked a 3-month cruise around the Mediterranean. It wasn't an act of malice, but an act of profound self-preservation. He realized that if he didn't fiercely defend his own right to exist, his family would casually erase him out of sheer convenience. He was drawing a line in the sand, demanding the respect he had earned. Chapter 5: The Price of Independence. Taking that stand, however, came with a heavy, unspoken cost. The Mediterranean cruise was beautiful, but Arthur often sat on his balcony, looking out at the vast ocean, wrestling with a lingering sense of isolation. His boundary setting had fundamentally altered the family dynamic. Phone calls from his children became less frequent and much more formal. The warmth of unconditional family love had been replaced by a cold, polite distance. This is the tragic reality of the 2026 senior crisis. Independence at 80 often means accepting a degree of loneliness. It is the uncomfortable realization that your family's affection was, at least in part, tied to what you could provide for them. Arthur feels a complex grief for the family he thought he had, mixed with a fierce pride in the man he still is. He chose to be lonely on his own terms, rather than being surrounded by people who were just waiting for him to check out. It takes immense bravery to stand alone at the end of your life, holding onto your dignity when the world demands your surrender. Arthur's story is a stark mirror reflecting a harsh truth about aging today. The generation that changed the world is refusing to go quietly, even if it means fighting their own blood. But we want to turn this over to you, because this conversation is happening in living rooms everywhere. If you were sitting in Arthur's chair, hearing your children divide your life's work, what would you do? Would you give up your sanctuary to ease their financial burden? Or would you fight for your dignity, even if it cost you your family's warmth? Let us know in the comments below. We are reading every single one.